Well, that was an excellent panel. Let's give them one more hand. And I expect another excellent panel. And in this conference, I sometimes call people friends of IQT. And with that, I mean they've been around a number of times. They come back to us to speak, to give valuable information, but also to think about how this conference can evolve over time, what the next topic should be, and who the speakers should be. And we surely hope that every one of you will become or are considered or feeling themselves considered to be friends of IQT. You are. So come to us, help us make an even better event all the time. The next one is one of those people, Cathal Mahon. He is a senior scientific lead for Novo Nordisk Foundation, which was announced recently as a big program on quantum in Denmark. And he will lead a panel on quantum safe in the military. Cathal has been around for a long time in science and commercialization in Ireland and in Denmark. So he's been everywhere. And please, I wish you good luck with the panel to come. Thank you. Looking forward.
Thank you very much, Kees, for the introduction. He neglected to mention that I've actually also worked in the Netherlands for a couple of years as well. So I have maybe been a little bit around. But thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Cathal Mahon. As Kees mentioned, I'm at the Novo Nordisk Foundation, where I'm senior scientific lead. What that basically means is that I've been tasked to basically establish a new accelerator and incubator for quantum technologies in Denmark. We'll be opening our doors here during the course of 2023. It will not be a part of the foundation, it'll be a separate entity, but it will be addressing startups within life science area, and will also have an affiliation with the Diana NATO Center for Quantum Technologies as well. So it's quite apt that I'm here, moderator for this Quantum Safe in the Military panel. And I would like to introduce you to this very eclectic and experienced panel here, who have each their perspective on this topic. First here on my left is Sonny Dosanjh from DUSA SPACE. Next beside him is Michael Kobidu, from Aliro Quantum, and then there's Michael Kralina from the Czech Technical University. Welcome to all three of you. Maybe I could ask each of you to introduce yourselves and what your company or what you yourselves are working on in the context of quantum safe in the military. Perhaps, Sonny, you could start off.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you to everyone who's here. And I appreciate your time and attention. Sonny Dosanjh, CEO, founder of DUSA SPACE, or DUSA SPACE. I've been involved in the military for about 40 years. United States Air Force in the 80s, all the way through, on and off, US Navy, US Army, different projects, and in the civilian sector. So how do the two integrate, interoperate, as we've seen networks evolve, cybersecurity used to be a backseat, now become at the forefront, how applications, how virtualization, how does that all play together? And how does that all play together in multi-domains? So I'll touch upon a few things that we are involved in from a quantum perspective. In this conversation, I'll keep it to cybersecurity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonny. Michael, could you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Kubidu. I'm one of the co-founders of Aliro Quantum. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Cathal for moderating this awesome panel, and to the organizers for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. So Aliro Quantum is taking a slightly different approach to cybersecurity in the sense that we are approaching it from a physics-based perspective rather than a math-based. So Aliro Quantum is offering a end-to-end multi-purpose entanglement-based quantum networking solution. I know that's a mouthful, but essentially, entanglement-generating quantum networks have a lot of potential both in cybersecurity, but also enabling other applications such as distributed quantum computing and quantum sensing as well. So it's great to be here. Good to see some familiar faces and start this conversation with new people as well. And I think what excites me about this field is how interdisciplinary it is, and that's one of the founding philosophies of how we structured our team at Aliro, combining the classical networking experts from the cybersecurity space, also with the brilliant minds of quantum physicists, and bridging those two fields together to create a good solution for protecting the data of today and of the future. So I'm very excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Michael. And Michael, could you see a few?
Hello, so my name is Michal Kralina. I'm really happy to be here and for this opportunity. So I'm from Czech Republic, from Prague, from Europe. My quantum activities are partly commercial. I have a small company, a consulting company. I work mostly with venture capital, venturous investors. But my main activities are more academic, where I'm interested in security and mainly defense applications. I wrote that big paper, Quantum Technologies for Military Application, that maps all considered applications. So there I have like two tracks. In one, I collaborate with different parts of NATO, like Allied Command Transformation or Joint Air Power Competence Centers. So it's more like partly educational, partly about the analysis, how could be in the future, or some analysis for law enforcement institutions and corporations, organizations. And my other track is my own natural research, where I'm interested in other quantum threats or risk, apart the obvious short algorithms attack. There are other interesting topics, for example, the impact of quantum technologies for the arms race in the space, where in particular right now I'm working on assessment and simulation how laser weapons could be used against free space quantum communications. Or another topic is about the impact of quantum technologies for CBR and defense. It means chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear defense. So that's shortly about me.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. So maybe we could start with a bit of a general question. I mean, there's been a lot of talk at this conference about PQC, QKD, and where best cases to use it, when not to use it, who recommends it, who doesn't recommend it, etc. But maybe we could get some empirical data here by asking each of you to come with, based on your interactions with your customers in the defense sector, you know, what you are sensing in your interactions in terms of PQC versus QKD in the context of quantum safe. Sonny, shall we start with you again?
Sure, that's a great question. How would I say this? For about the last 18 months, as I've been comparing and contrasting in our labs of how PQC, let's pick on that one, of how it's effective for one particular military branch, pros and cons, how you have to interoperate in a system that's already in production, let's use that word. Then how do you incorporate without what we use in the civilian sector, you know, rip and replace. We have to keep things operational. So what's more effective? What's realistic? Just to show that this capability and this science, if you will, of post-quantum crypto is actually doing its part. So can we operate in a hybrid mode where certain systems are going to take a while to upgrade just because of physical limitations of the vessel, if you will. Let's just use that word. And so how can you quickly prove out a model in real time? And for a lot of us who have been in cybersecurity, we're often burdened with the performance hit afterwards. So it's one thing to put measures in place, but do you really need the belts and suspenders? When we looked at the PQC side of the house, we stood it up, tested it out. Did it function? Did it operate? And then we started looking at the performance. So really look at the efficiency. Now, when you compare that to doing something with QKD, especially when you go into different orbits, let's use that word, it's a little more involved. So there is a time constraint of if you are looking for results and you are looking at standards and you are looking at the civilian side versus what can be done on a closed network. What can you really do without some of those rules, policy, and government ordinances or limitations coming into play? So that's the way we approached it, and we're seeing some initial results where in the United States, PQC seems to be moving at a faster clip for certain situations. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay, but you're seeing both, sounds like, both PQC and QKD?
Yeah, I look at it globally.
Yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I did not say that in certain theaters of operation, we have to interoperate. There's no way around it. Even if it's a closed system,
Okay.
you're going to have to use a mix and match approach, even though for some scenarios, you will go down one path, let's say a PQC path.
Okay.
But if you're going to play friendly with boots on the ground in other nations, then you're going to have to mix and match.
Okay, okay, thank you. Michael, what are your views and experience?
So I think just based on our engagements in around the last 6 months or so, the sense we've got is that they don't necessarily want to put all of their eggs into one basket, and we approach it from more of a composite solution where we have this interplay and cooperation between the physics-based and the math-based approaches. So when it comes to QKD, I think there's the question of economic viability in terms of integrating this and deploying it without this rip and replace approach. So I think that's one of the primary concerns that we've been hearing. And also with PQC, I think they've done a great job so far thinking about that integration aspect and without having to take the network down. So, I think based on our engagements, the agencies and the entities we've been talking to are really interested in more of a holistic quantum networking approach, which is good to see. It's a great sign that they're looking ahead, not just what's available today, but how do we upgrade our system and start working on this now, looking at the technology roadmaps on the hardware side and the software side, seeing where we're at now in the field and projecting out into the future and coming up with a composite solution that could leverage all these different approaches.
Okay, great, that's interesting to hear. And Michael, your view, of course, will probably be based on your interaction with the military in Europe.
Exactly. I would divide it in 2 parts. First is about awareness, because here we know about this threat, but it's still not automatic. So from my perspective, from my experience, typically military intelligence or counterintelligence, they are very well aware about this threat, including in small countries. If you will speak about like regular army, for example, for Czech Republic, it's not so good. But regarding, for example, NATO is pretty well aware. NATO mark quantum technologies as one of EDT's technologies. It means emerging disruptive technologies. NATO has various activities as part of STO, as was mentioned, or Diana. But also individual parts of the NATO has own projects. For example, Cybersecurity Center is playing with the post-PQC, or there are also more exotic projects. For example, in May, I spoke at a small workshop about underwater quantum technologies, and there was presentation from CMRE where they demonstrated underwater QKD, but of course only for several meters. So there is in general awareness. From my perspective, like PQC is something like must have. In case of QKD, it's a big question. ACT prepared some big report about quantum technology, so maybe in a near time, the NATO will make maybe some bigger movement, like a long-term strategy. But so regarding QKD, I think there will be big discussions if, when, and how. Because, okay, we can implement now BB84 with the decoy stage. We will wait for MDI QKD, or we will wait for quantum entanglement. We will implement it as standalone system, or we will integrate with laser communication. So, and each decision will have different costs. So that's what we will need to study, or NATO will need to study and decide.
Okay, great, thank you. So it sounds like as if both technologies are in play, and it's actually a great segue into the next question, which is, one thing is identifying, which of the two or both technologies, but what about the implementation? And I'd just like to ask you whether or not, I know you both have customers in both civilian applications and the military, but is there a difference in terms of implementation when you're talking about quantum safe in the military versus the civilian sector? And Michael, maybe we could start with you this time around.
Sure, yeah. So I think approaching it from a practicality perspective is really important in terms of ease of deployment, cryptographic agility, thinking about legacy systems, and assessing the pros and cons of each, or a composite solution as well. But I think it goes back to having those conversations, understanding not only the use case, but other parameters as well. The frequency of communication, the distance, what media is most prominent and most frequent for those use cases, and doing that by an agency by agency or entity by entity basis. And I think that's the important approach here is looking at it from that practicality of deployment perspective, understanding their needs and their constraints as well, and then going from there and identifying which solution is best for them.
But can you say whether there's like a common denominator for, say, quantum safe in the military versus quantum safe in civilian applications, in terms of there's some need to haves that are not prevalent in the civilian sector?
Right. So I think going back to the discussion about open network versus closed network, there are some implications there on the actual implementation of these solutions, which is widely different in the civilian and military perspectives. So, but also understanding that from the military perspective, that we need to get the data to the soldiers, the sailors, the warfighters, so they can use it in real time and make those decisions faster than the adversary, and doing that in a secure way, understanding how that data needs to be secured, understanding how to detect if it's been tampered. Mm-hmm. Those are considerations that aren't necessarily as relevant in the civilian sector, right? So having those conversations with the government entities and understanding those requirements, those constraints, and the environmental contexts as well that apply to really a militaristic scenario rather than a civilian one.
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting points. Sonny, do you also have experience with special requirements or additional requirements for military applications?
Yeah, it goes without saying, for anything in the military, beholden to a different set of standards than the civilian sector. I've been in Silicon Valley for the last 35 years, it seems like. And although we're pushing the envelope of what the civilians can utilize and adopt around the globe, if I go back to my military days in the Air Force in the 80s, I was in the 509th Bombardment Wing. There's a new plane coming out in the next few years. It's in test phase right now, the B-21 Raider, right? And so if you look at the cockpit of the Raider, and this is public knowledge, so I'm not disclosing any confidential information, it's a Kubernetes orchestration. And if you look at how the microservices communicate with each other, and you're going to replace that TLS or mutual TLS layer with it's not going to be QKD, it has to be PQC, because what are you going to do in the cockpit if you're going to secure those containers as well as the performance? So as we now go into communication channels into low Earth orbit, LEO or GEO, and we start to look at what's practical from SAT to SAT communication, and then what's practical into the cockpit and into the helmet of cognition and controlling systems, now we're getting into simulation. So what we have the capability of doing of a digital twin of a B-21 Raider is a little different when we look at systems of control and implementation. Can that translate one day to the civilian sector? Yes, in the gaming section and what you see there. But the performance and the security protocols that we utilize for that communication channel, and then making sure it's not compromised, is something that we are using different measures of control. That I see the difference when I look at healthcare, financials, and different sectors in the civilian side. Without getting into details, those are some general thoughts.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Michael, do you have any comments on this?
Yes, actually, I have 2 points. First, I will stay with the NATO. NATO is the alliance of 30 different countries, so possibly up to 30 different PQC or QKD solutions. Okay, today we have some PQC algorithms, so now we should move and have some PQC protocols where a different solution can speak each other and make agreement on one particular encryption. And that will be actually a role of the NATO, because the role of NATO is to make coordination not only at a strategical or tactical level, but also at the technical, because different countries has different weapon system, communication systems, and there need to be some standards. They all can communicate with each other. That's one thing. The other things, the second point is mostly about the quantum networks. For military deployment, they need to be even more resilient or more tough, because for a normal, let's say, a client, you have like fixed address, yes? You have close or far each other, but they are at the same place. In case of army, especially if it's in action, they are highly mobile, even in hostile environment. So it's even more difficult, and you need to build this quantum network even more resilient if you want to use at such environment.
Okay, that's actually a great segue into the next question I have here, which actually maybe I'd like to start with you again, Michael, this time around. But we've talked bilaterally about the increasing role of gathering operational data and using that as in decision support systems. Are there any indications now that this increased usage of data is beginning to, I mean, that because of the fact that there is this importance or increasing importance of data, that PQC and QKD and all these quantum-safe technologies are becoming more and more important?
Yes, yes. As I mentioned, the departments at NATO I speak, they mostly look into the future. So, like long-term vision of the NATO is like some kind of data-centric alliance. So you know, the US is known that they have like the biggest asset in space and air for ISR, but it's not only. Also, all other countries, including Czech Republic, is a small country, but they are preparing one let's say, intelligence satellite. And even improving those systems, they have better resolutions, they can measure more, so it's more data demanding. So first of all, you will need bigger capacities that lead us to laser communication. That will be future. Even today, US Air Force is testing communication between planes and satellites. So that surely is quite mature and is surely a way. But of course, if you need to collect those data and keep in some big cloud and process them. But of course, because it's mostly like military sensitive data, the last things you want that someone read or even modify your data. So there is big space for security. So PQC surely should be there, has space, and I think it will be quite big business. And especially QKD can help us on the way when we move data from, for example, space or air to those data centers. So there can be possibly a large future. And as I mentioned, I personally see big opportunity in integration of quantum communication and laser communication, because technically there is quite interesting overlap. They both use a APT system, beacon laser. So basically, simply said, QKD could be just one module in this laser communication constellation.
Okay, so you're basically saying that because of the existing infrastructure for laser communications, then that the technological complexity to introduce QKD is somewhat less because there's already a lot of infrastructure in place.
Yeah, it would be like laser communication for high-speed data transfer, and your QKD will be that security layer. Okay. I think it's quite interesting combination.
Okay. Michael, I could see you were kind of nodding as Michael was answering the question there, which was this, the fact that data, the increasing importance of data, that is maybe driving an increased awareness of introducing these security measures.
Of course, yeah, and I think as we all know, operational data has never been more important now, and its role going forward is going to be of increased importance. So making sure that data is secure is an ever increasing need. That being said, in the militaristic scenario, it's like we said before, very different than the civilian one, in the sense that in these militaristic scenarios, you have mobile nodes, you have environments, and even think about free space links. You have to think about line of sight issues. Yeah. But a lot of the optical communications infrastructure is there, which makes that barrier to entry to enable quantum communications a little less of a threshold, which is good news. That being said, I think just looking at, for example, like the U.S. Army's data plan going forward, published by their CIO recently, there's this increasing need for securing this data and ensuring that it is delivered in real time in different scenarios. And going back to the PQC QKD debate, and this more composite solution, which is why I think based on our engagements they are interested in this. In a militaristic scenario, maybe QKD isn't as viable. You're in, having a sat link maybe isn't practical, or you can't have fiber in the ground, right? So there are different scenarios where you have to leverage these different solutions, like PQC, for example, which is easier for deployment. So, it depends on the scenario, depends on the environmental context and those parameters as well. So, I think it's important to undertake the standards efforts to think about what this kind of hybrid composite solution would look like in a standardized fashion, and actually deploying that on those mobile nodes, those drones, those UAVs, combining with the ground stations, the data centers, but also with the satellites as well. So,
great, thank you. Sonny, your thoughts on this, the increasing importance of data and how it's accelerating the adaptation of...
I just want to make sure I'm at the right show. If you're asking data or network or PQC or QKD, because it's a different concept. If you're going to switch to data, it's a different mindset altogether. What I see here is just the starting points of QKD, PQC. We're early stages of building networks. If you go back 25 years, we did not know what the apps would look like or what the data repercussions were. So this time around, I go, let me work it backwards. I talked about the digital twin. I talked about streaming into the cockpit. We're looking at, most people think of data and they think of structured or unstructured or semi-structured. We're thinking of files or we're thinking of databases. I'm looking at pixels, and about 10 years ago, I was looking at voxels as we were streaming into the cockpit of showing simulated turbulence, not a two-line text. So as we look at data integrity and whether it's stored or in use, I think another gentleman mentioned in transit, at rest, there's a different mindset when you look at data constructs as well as how you do the analysis on it. So those are different topics of where does quantum play into that? Obviously, quantum computers, quantum sensors, but from the security, from a cybersecurity standpoint, I'm looking at how is that data being viewed? So we look at from a distribution of that data over a quantum facilitated infrastructure, and the term I usually come up with is an armored browser. If we're looking at browser-based, if you're going app-based, obviously different story. But that consumption of data and then the hit, the performance hit, based upon how that data is constructed, can it utilize the network in an optimal way? So these are usually done in silos. They're usually, if history has taught us anything, is that the network guys don't talk to the app guys, don't talk to the data, platform, policy. It's all siloed. So my approach is I go, I'm going to do it different. We've tried it kind of hop, skip, and jump over the last 40 years. There has to be a better way. So when I look at my EU partners, my partners in Asia Pac, LATAM, and obviously here in North America, I go, we have a way to shift this paradigm. And so you know what? We're going to go for it. And time will tell if we're near or close to the target. But the goal is whether that data is utilized in a physical space, a virtual space, we're going into cognition. We're going into different areas of how airmen, sailors, Marines, soldiers, and so on are thinking with the data, and then how they're modeling that into an actionable result, if you will.
Great, thank you very much. At this point, maybe I'd like to open up to any questions from the audience, or case if there are any questions from the online audience, then maybe this would be a good time to... I see a hand up here, yes. It's from RAND Corporation, yeah?
Yeah, me again, sorry. So it's a question for the panel, I think maybe primarily for Mikkel. We talk about NATO needing interoperability for information systems. NIST has said that they intend to make their PQC standard an international standard. Do you see this being like a useful route to get to interoperability among NATO countries, or do you think it's going to proceed along something else, some other standard, some other way to achieve interoperability?
Okay, I'm not so close to this PQC and NATO. I think there are more organizations that's trying for some PQC standardization, but as far as I know, no one has so strong like a security check. So I think in this case, NIST will be the most trustable. And since also the US has like the strongest word in the NATO, so I think it's very likely that what the NIST will say, it will be applied in NATO. It's my expectation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from Case or from anybody else?
I don't need it.
Okay. As we speak, okay. Well, at this, I can see we really only have a couple of more minutes. So if there are no further questions, then maybe I could just finish with like a quick kind of 30-second answer type of question to all three of you. I mean, looking forward, I mean, we heard earlier on this morning that from Thales that threats evolve, things change. Could you just give me kind of like a quick view from your perspective of whether this is something that is an integral part of what the military is doing today in the way that they view quantum safe? Is it forward-looking as well as here and now? Start maybe with Michael.
Okay, so as I said, PQC is must-have. Regarding quantum networks, I'm not sure if solely QKD, but I'm optimistic in long term, like quantum information network that provides more security-related protocols or networked sensors. That is starting to be very interesting, and I think at the military level it will be employed. But as I said, it can be more like maybe in 10 years, maybe more, when we'll really work all together and they just will deploy it.
Okay, thank you. Michael, are you seeing kind of these thought processes looking further ahead than just here and now?
Yeah, I think in the last 6 months, based on our engagements, it's been a shift to more future-looking beyond what's available right now. And I think it's really important to have those conversations with those agencies to look at the technology roadmaps and say, okay, here's where we are now, here's where we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years. These are the capabilities, the pros and cons of deploying this. Right, so we're starting to have those conversations, and I think things like the CHIPS Act, for example, and like getting that funding downstream to investigate these questions and assess the roadmaps is extremely important, and it's a great sign that we're moving in the right direction as a country and having those conversations. Not only how can we protect ourselves now, but come up with a solution that will be longer lasting.
Great, thank you. Sonny, you get the last word.
Yes, I think what's overlooked when we talk about quantum safe in the military, it's not just equipment and devices, but it's the people, it's the humans, and we get damaged, we get hurt. So how quickly can you transfer information over these quantum infrastructures that are being secured by PQC or QKD to get the right information to that medic in the battlefield or in the hospital, whether they're in Europe or Asia or back here in the United States. So you want to get that information about what the condition is, so the surgeon or the medic, and if we're going into exoskeletons, if we're going into other health-related treatments, that network that is now being secured without false positives, without being compromised as far as what the decisions are going into cognition or physical, is what DUSA is primarily leading with, because we see the repercussions, what happens with veterans here with PTSD. And the initiatives with the American Legion, I'm also a Royal British Legionnaire, we're looking to cut down some of those suicides from 22 a day down as much as we can. So my goal is to make sure that the network is not compromised. That's table stakes. And what we do with cognition and devices in the military and in the veteran community is what we're championing.
Great, thank you very much, Sonny. I'd like to ask all of you to thank the three panelists here for participating here and providing their insights. Thank you. Okay.
Quantum computers are an existential threat. Not in 10 years, now. Nation-state adversaries are harvesting data today, ready to decrypt in tomorrow's quantum-powered world. This threatens the very fabric of today's world order. Government secrets will be exposed. Intellectual property will be stolen. Trust in the digital economy will collapse. We've been preparing for this day since 2009. As the first quantum protection software company in the world, we're already working with mission-critical organizations like NATO to create secure communications. Our quantum-safe platform protects governments and businesses across their end-to-end digital footprint. We're helping critical national infrastructure, defense, and financial services organizations as they transition to a quantum-safe future. Our products are interoperable, crypto-agile, and backward compatible. We also have a distinguished record in fundamental research. We've done the R&D, we've built the products you need, and we're ready to support you to become quantum safe. The Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act already requires US federal agencies to upgrade to next-generation encryption, and other organizations need to be prepared. We're ready for a post-quantum world. Are you?
Well, let's